Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, across Africa. Welcome to the third edition of the Frontier Science Seminar Series 2021. Our theme for this seminar series this year is Disrupting Stagnation, Empowering Africa's Future. And this seminar series have been initiated to increase the conversation of how Africa can spur developmental needs. And we are approaching this from the perspective of what science can contribute in pushing this development. My name is Bright Waro. I'm based at the University of Gothenburg in Sweden. I'm the convener of this seminar series, and my co-convener is Eman Sob, who is based in Egypt. Together, we are leading this platform. The topic of today is sustainability in scientific research in Africa. And as you can see, we have two distinguished African sons who will be dissecting this topic today in the person of Professor Kenneth Amaeshi from the University of Edinburgh Business School, and Professor Frederick Armah from the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. They will be formally introduced when the time comes. The moderator of this evening is Dr. David Doku, a close colleague of mine, who will be taking us through and moderating the session this evening. These are the things we aim to cover this evening as time permits us. We have promised to keep you here for 2 hours, and that promise we want to keep. But so we will do our best to see that we cover all that we plan this evening. Otherwise, we will end when the time is set. Just to highlight a little bit about the Frontiers Initiative. As you see, we are building a science capacity building platform across Africa, and this platform we have set to provide training in career development in science, and there we provide courses in scientific research methods and processes, courses around science leadership, courses around enhancing science communication, mentoring of young African scientists, science seminars and workshops we organize. One of those is what we have in this seminar series. Our overarching goal is to contribute to Africa's path to development through science. This started last year, in which we set our 3-year plan to provide free courses in scientific research, scientific research processes, science leadership. And we had the first course in July 2020, in which we had about 40 participants across 10 African countries participating. Second course came in this January. We have about 60 participants also across 20 African countries. The first course was in systematic reviews, and the second course, this one was in reproducibility in scientific research. We plan to have another course in April or May this year, and the next one will be in October. And each of these courses, we plan to repeat them as we are within the 3-year plan we have. Our goal is that at the end of these 3 years, we should be able to train 500 young African scholars in scientific research methods, mentor at least 50 of these scholars. The Frontier Seminar Series is an addition we are bringing into this in which we want to generate conversation in addition to the courses we are giving. And these conversations for this year, we center around issues of capacity building, career development, reawakening of excellence in scientific research, galvanizing the different stakeholders in the society, including the scientists themselves, the private sector, the government, the press, the charities, the lay people, because we need all hands on deck to move our continent in the right direction. And so the courses are recorded, and the videos from the courses are deposited in our YouTube channel. And the seminar series we are running this year will also be deposited in the YouTube channel. In the training we had last year, July, these are some of the things the participants say. Eventually, they were quite satisfied with the course, and that is quite impressive to see what they say about the course. And for this year also, they were also quite satisfied with the training we offered this year. So please make a time to attend, register for some of these courses and attend. There, what we do is quite unique in the sense that we don't only provide you with new skills and knowledge for your career, we allow you to make connections across Africa. It's quite interesting to see that many of these who attend through collaborative projects, they get to know each other and initiate new frontiers, new projects they can work together. We mentor you, we give you experiences that we have gained from our years in our own career and share these experiences. Many of these experiences we call street smart skills, are not things you see in the books. They are things that are generated. We share with you on how you can also improve what you do in your career. And as I said, the courses are deposited in the YouTube channel, and the next training, research funding, and grant writing will come around April, May this year. Please watch out for the space because we'll announce it so that you can join. And so for this year, we have themes for each quarter, and then we have specific topics that will be presented during the course of this year's Frontier Seminar Series. So please endeavor not to miss any of these, because we want full participants and discussions to come from this. The goal is that at the end of this seminar series, we will have a book that will be printed based on the chapters of this seminar series. Each topic will form a chapter. The speakers will be asked to write, and at the end we aim to publish a book on this. Next year we also want to continue on this trajectory, but the focus next year will change. Instead of focusing on career and career development and capacity building, we want to spotlight cutting edge research Africans are doing across different fields of endeavor, engineering and technology, arts and humanities, medicine. And we aim that each quarter will have presentations across these general fields, and we do this through the year. So please also watch out for this space. We start next year for this. So we have distinguished speakers that have been confirmed to lead these presentations, and we are quite fortunate to have them accept our invitation to present in this forum. So the seminar series recorded and deposited at the YouTube channel. We'll compile books, as I said, from this. We also have an interesting session at the last edition of each quarter. We'll be having 3 hours. And why it's 3 hours is that we're integrating or an extra, special extra we call My Career, My Story. This will be 1 hour after the main session, in which we invite some upcoming and established Africans who we come to give us appetizers of what their career has been like, their career journey, present this, and then to motivate us as well, because some of us need motivation to go to the next level. So please watch out. The last edition of each quarter will have the special extra. Please, overall, don't plan to miss any of the sessions we have in the seminar series, because they are fully packed with important topics and capable hands to handle them. Some housekeeping issues. We have separate registration for each seminar series. So watch out the space. I will usually send information about these few days after each edition. Once we start this, everyone is muted at entry. We'll have promised 2 hours. We want to keep that. If you want to ask questions, please write it on the chat box. The moderators and the frontiers ambassadors, as we call them, will be collecting your questions, and they will aim to give room to as many people to speak, but that will depend on the time. But please write your question, and then they will look at it to prioritize who can speak, and who the questions can be read and the speaker will answer. We also have separate evaluation for each session, and then we ask you to check your email after each session, and they will send this, and then please give us your impression, because we want to improve as we go through this year. If you're not registered and you joined here, please put your email on the chat feature on Zoom, and then we'll collect that to add to the email list we have. So that will help you to receive further information in the future. So edition 1, edition 2 are already the YouTube channel, so please check it out. Now let me introduce the moderator for this evening, who is a very close colleague, David Doku. We have had good journeys together in our career, having studied together as master's student and PhD student. It's quite fortunate for me and great to have David participating, moderating today's session. Currently, David is an associate professor of public health. He's the head of the Department of Population and Health, deputy director of the Directorate of Research and Innovation and Consultancy, all at the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. He had his MSc and PhD, both of us did the same at Tampere University in Finland. His such interest goes across health inequalities, issues of global health, maternal and child health issues, and health behaviors, amongst others. David has numerous merits. He's an adjunct professor at the Tampere University, Finland. He has published over 80 papers in reputable journals, which include JAMA and JAMA series of journals, Lancet and Lancet series of journals. He's an associate editor in the BMC Public Health, the Global Health section. He has won numerous awards, and all this testify to his scientific output and contribution, which are quite impressive. David, thank you for coming this evening and to moderate this session. The floor is yours now, please. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this, and I call on every one of us to contribute our quota in the discussion that we follow. Thank you. David, now to you.
Thank you very much, Bright, for this great initiative, you and your colleagues, and thank you very much for that very elaborate introduction. So we have today very distinguished professors to speak with us, and I am happy that we also have so many wonderful participants in today's session. We will have the first presentation by Professor Atuama, and I'm going to give a very brief, very brief introduction of Professor Frederick Atuama. Professor Frederick Atuama is a professor of environmental and sustainability science at the University of Cape Coast. Currently, he has the Directorate of Research, Innovation, and Consultancy, also at the University of Cape Coast. Before he became the director, he worked there also as a deputy director for close to 5 years, if I got it right. And he's worked at almost all levels of the educational ladder in Ghana. He worked at the basic level, secondary level, tertiary level, and in fact, for the past 11 or more years, he has been at the tertiary level. He has received very distinguished awards, including the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, Innovation and Technology Joint Award for the Best Innovative Scientist. Professor Atuama's research interest includes applied multivariate statistics, environmental and human health risk assessment, system dynamic modeling, and climate change. Professor Atuama is a member of a number of national and international learned bodies, including a member of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. He has consulted very widely, both nationally and internationally, including consultation for the World Bank in the area of environment and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Professor Frederick Atuama to share with us his presentation today on sustainability in scientific research in Africa. Prof. Armah, please, you have the floor.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for the time. It is a privilege to be part of this groundbreaking initiative by Frontiers, and I want to seize the opportunity to thank Professor Bright Nwaru, who is the convener for the Frontiers Seminar Series, and his co-convener, Professor Iman Sob, for the wonderful work that they are doing. I believe that the Frontiers Seminar Series is a veritable platform for building a critical mass of researchers on the continent who can do scholarly research of the highest quality. Therefore, I'm very privileged to be part of this initiative, and I believe that this will be a harbinger of wonderful things to come, how we want to position the continent on the global landscape as a research, innovation, development hub. So I thank you all for this opportunity. I also want to thank Professor David Doku, who is moderating this session, for the opportunity. Today, I want to talk about environmental sustainability. I will start from the global picture and then zoom in to the situation on the African continent. Much of the things that I'm going to say today relates to the work that I did with the United Nations Environment Program, now known as UN Environment. In 2015, the UN was interested in characterizing the state of environmental systems and ecological systems across the globe. And they commissioned a group of scientists to do these assessments, and I happened to be part of it. So we had regional assessments for various continents, and I was part of the team that did the Africa regional assessment. 2 years thereafter, I was co-opted to join the global assessment team. So I ended up with the assessment team for the globe, known as the Global Environment Outlook 6 team, that has been able to characterize the state of the environment as a result of the work that we did. Now, I will start by talking about the dimensions of sustainability. And in this particular context, I will focus more on the tripod: environment, economy, and society, and how these three elements interlock. And then I'll also talk about what we mean by the total environment. In the context of this presentation, what is environment? I'll talk about that, and then also talk about the drivers of environmental change. Then I'll shift my focus to one of the spheres of the environment, which is air or the atmosphere. And here I will zoom in on ozone depletion, greenhouse gases, persistent pollutants, organic pollutants, short-lived climate pollutants as well, and then move on to biodiversity. And in this particular context, I'll be focusing on marine and genetic biodiversity, and then species and ecosystems decline over the past 2 decades. Then I would seize the opportunity also to talk about aquatic ecosystems, in particular freshwater and marine ecosystems. I will talk about sustainable fisheries and marine plastics, pollutions that we have seen in the oceans during the past 10 years. I'll talk about waterborne diseases and then antimicrobial resistance, and then also use the opportunity to look at some of the remedial actions that have been taken with regards to marine protected areas. Following from that, I will look at another environmental media, that is soil and land. And here I will talk about deforestation, urbanization, food production, and erosion. And then I would also want to talk about cross-cutting environmental issues across the globe and then continent, and then zoom into some environmental policies that we have deployed over the past 2 or 3 decades to really arrest the decline in environmental quality. I will start with the sustainability dimensions, as I indicated earlier. Now, here we see the tripod. That is a system of 3 interlocking circles, where at the core we find sustainability. And here we find that sustainability relates to the center. And then we have the interface between economy and society. We want that interface to be equitable. We want the interface between the environment and society to be livable, and then the interface between the economy and the environment to be viable. This is one of the conceptualizations of sustainability. Still talking about the triple bottom line, which I showed on the previous slide, I'm here zooming in onto environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability. When we look at any of these 3 dimensions, they are critical elements that are of concern to us. So in relation to environmental sustainability, we'll be particularly interested in looking at resource use, habitat preservation, land use, which proportion of the land we allocate to agriculture, which proportion of the land we allocate to forestry, which proportion of the land we allocate as pastoral lands. We talk about pollution, we talk about biodiversity, soil, air, water quality, and then the beauty of the environment, environmental aesthetics. These are all elements pertaining to environmental sustainability. Then, of course, when we talk about economic sustainability, we are talking about continuity in terms of long-term profit, long-term cost and benefit analysis. We are thinking about managing risk, and we're also talking about research and development. They all fall within the domain of economic sustainability. And then when we come to the dimension of social sustainability, we are looking at individual dimensions, community dimensions, because we know that individuals are nested in communities and communities are nested in society. So we talk about human rights, awareness of sustainability, livability, accessibility to social amenities, social cohesion, culture, history. These are all very, very important dimensions of social sustainability, even in addition to education, good health, participatory approaches, and standards of living. These are all very, very important when it comes to social sustainability. At the core, we talk about access to ecosystem services, climate change, and then intergenerational justice or equity, which is at the core. These are all very, very important issues when it comes to sustainability. But then that is not the only way of looking at sustainability. Now, the triple bottom line, which I've alluded to earlier on, indicates that you can substitute natural capital with economic capital, human capital, social capital, and the like. But then when it comes to this debate, there are two schools of thought. Those that really adhere to the notion that weak sustainability, in which case we can replace natural capital with social capital, human capital, and is what should be the refrain or the dominant paradigm. But then you have the strong sustainability group or paradigm that really disagrees with this. In fact, the strong sustainability is saying that nothing can replace ecological capital or natural capital. In other words, natural capital cannot be substituted for. And therefore, they see that the economy should be the least of importance, followed by sociocultural, followed by ecological. So in terms of nesting, the economy should be the least, followed by sociocultural, and then ecological. So the ecological should be the biggest domain because nothing can replace it. And when they say this, they are alluding to the fact that we derive all our livelihoods somewhat from the environment, either directly or indirectly. So we have either primary dependence on the environment or secondary dependence on the environment. Now, we also can look at sustainability from 5 main approaches. And here I've already alluded to prioritization. So prioritization for those who are within the weak and strong sustainability paradigm, they would consider the 3 elements of sustainability in different ways in terms of priority. Weak sustainability will say they have equal priority, whereas strong sustainability will say that the ecological dimension takes precedence over all others. So in this particular sense, they will prioritize the ecological sustainability over any other dimension of sustainability. We may also want to look at sustainability from the standpoint of the SDGs. Now, we know that the SDGs are global goals that have been adopted. And here it means that across geopolitical regions, all countries are looking at the SDGs, looking at targets that have been set and how they can attain it. Prior to this, we had the Millennium Development Goals that was really established somewhere around about 20 years ago. That one focused almost exclusively on developing countries. So we see a departure from that, where now the SDGs are global in nature and all countries have roles to play in the achievement of these targets. Then we can also talk about sustainability, looking at sustainability at the local level, sustainability at the national level, sustainability at the regional level, and then sustainability at the global level. So here we are looking at sustainability in terms of spatial scale, the spatial scale at which sustainability can be implemented or can manifest. And we see that what is locally sustainable may not be regionally sustainable. What is nationally sustainable may not be globally sustainable. So it means that at every spatial scale, the elements that feed into sustainability will definitely differ. So we see heterogeneities in that particular context. Then we can also talk about sustainability from the intergenerational standpoint. That means that whatever we are doing now, we should make sure that it doesn't compromise the capacity of future generations to make a living for themselves. So here we talk about equity, we talk about fairness, we talk about justice in what we do to ensure that we don't unduly disadvantage the future generation who are yet to occupy this planet. Then the last domain is the multi-level approach, where we consider sustainability as multi-layered and all taking place at the same time. So it means that in terms of sustainability, we should be acting individually, we should be acting politically, and we should be acting from the societal level. So if we take the individual action, we are talking about consumerism, our lifestyle choices that have impact on sustainability. These are issues that come to the fore when we look at sustainability from the multi-level approach. So far, I've alluded to environmental sustainability, but I've not distilled what goes into the environment. I want to use just a minute to really drill down what we mean by the environment in the context of this presentation. Now, we will consider the environment from 5 main spheres. So we talk about air or the atmosphere. We talk about biosphere or biodiversity. We talk about hydrosphere or water, that is fresh water or marine resources. And then we talk about land and soil, which is lithosphere. Then we also talk about the anthroposphere, which is the sphere of man. Man is now considered as a geological force within the concept of the Anthropocene. Man is changing the face of the planet. Man is changing planetary systems, and therefore we are deemed to be in the Anthropocene. So the Anthroposphere is very, very important. If we take, for instance, sewage disposal from domestic sources, it will definitely fall within the Anthroposphere. So these 5 spheres in the context of this presentation must be considered as the environment, total environment for that matter. Now, we know that there are several drivers that is changing the face of the planet in terms of the environment. One of the key drivers of environmental change is population. And we know that the work that we did with the UN, we project that by 2050, we will have about 10 billion people inhabiting the planet. This will definitely impose some stress on the ecological systems that we have. But then the demographics are interesting when we look at this population demographic that we are going to see by 2050. We'll have the older folks in richer countries and the younger folk in poorer countries. And then we also estimate that by 2050, out of the 6 to 7 billion people who will be living in cities, 2 to 3 billion of this population will be living in informal settlements, mainly marginal lands and areas that have limited access to social amenities, which means they are living on the periphery and are not on the within the core. And then we also see that we need to eradicate poverty and hunger, but then this also comes with concomitant increases in consumption and extraction of resources. Technology definitely is important in really addressing agricultural productivity, but then there's also a drawback because technology is not benign. It comes with its own challenges in terms of creation of more waste and toxins. And then when we come to climate change, we already are committed because sea level rise is taking place, and we see the magnitude and the frequency of droughts and severe weather events increasing. Now I'll move from that and then talk about the state of the atmosphere or air. We know that air pollution is a big issue, and about 7 million people are projected to really die prematurely based on air pollution. And I will briefly show what are the drivers of this particular predictions. Mostly greenhouse gases, which I'm going to talk about in the jiffy. And then we see ODS or ozone depleting substances, which also require much more attention to address. We know that in the past 30 years, the partial pressure of ozone has been increasing in the stratosphere, but then it hasn't closed completely. We still need policy action to address all of these issues. Now, here I talk about the Dpsi Framework, which is a systematic way of evaluating some of the changes that we are seeing in the environment, particularly air. And here, the Dpsi Framework talks about the drivers, the pressures, the state, the impact, and the responses that really are occasioned when it comes to air pollution. Now, I also talk about one atmosphere because the atmosphere is linked across countries. The geopolitical boundaries that we have on the surface of the land do not really appertain to what happens in the atmosphere or air. Therefore, an air pollutant in Ghana could easily migrate to Nigeria, even though there are two intervening countries between these two countries. And the same could be the case from Nigeria to another country. So the air pollutants do not require visa to travel. They migrate unfettered, they migrate unhindered. And therefore, whatever is happening in one country has systematic effects on another country. Now, here I would briefly talk about the drivers of air pollution. So we know that some of the drivers, we have energy production, transport, industry, residential sources, waste disposal, agriculture, and then natural sources, typically volcanoes. Now, when it comes to energy production, we know we have carbon monoxide, which exerts pressure on air quality. And then we talk about non-methane volatile organic compounds, NOx, ammonia, sulfur dioxide, black carbon, organic carbon, sand and dust, methane, carbon dioxide, ozone depleting substances, persistent organic pollutants, mercury and lead, and many such gases that are exerting a lot of pressure on the atmosphere. This then, of course, will affect the state of air pollution, climate change, depletion of ozone in the stratosphere, and then persistent bioaccumulative toxins. This will definitely have human health impacts. It will impact food security, it will impact the quality of ecosystems, and then other effects. And of course, we then have to take certain steps to address these impacts to the air. Moving from air, I want to briefly talk about biodiversity. We know for a fact that we are in a crisis when it comes to biodiversity because we are said to be experiencing the 6th mass extinction in the Earth history. We also know that 70% of poor people rely on natural resources for their livelihoods. These are communities that depend almost exclusively on natural resources. There has been a 60% reduction in species since 1970, or between the period 1970 and 2014. This 60% decline is evidenced by the Living Planet Index. And then, of course, we know that out of the 14 terrestrial habitats that we have, 10 of them have showed a decrease in vegetation productivity between the year 2000 and 2013. These are dire statistics, but in fact, that is the reality confronting us. We also are aware that global fish stocks have declined because of massive exploitation of fish stocks, 33%, we see that. And then, of course, we talk about crop genetic diversity and all of those things that are also related to biodiversity. From biodiversity, I would briefly talk about oceans and coast, that is the aquatic ecosystems. We see a lot of coral reefs being destroyed. On the west coast of Africa, we don't normally have coral reefs, but on the east coast of Africa and southern coast of Africa, we have a lot of coral reefs. And the rate at which coral reefs are being degraded is far more faster than the rate at which it's being regenerated. So when it comes to this, we talk about the assimilative capacity of these ecosystems and the regenerative capacity of these ecosystems. Both have been compromised. And then we know that fishes and aquaculture is increasing, but it's still far below what is needed to really provide nutrition for the world's population. We know that fish provides over 3 billion with 20% of their dietary protein intake, which means that we need to take steps to conserve these fisheries resources. But of importance is the fact that plastics, 8 million tons of plastics enter oceans every year through domestic waste and mismanagement of other domestic waste that we find across countries. We've also seen some industrial disposal in the oceans as well. One of the ways that we can really address degradation of coastal ecosystems has been to establish marine protected areas. And when we establish marine protected areas, it is to ensure that all the areas are conserved for the sake of biodiversity and for the sake of restoration of ecosystems. And this is very, very important to really address industrial carbon and to offset the carbon that we are accumulating in the earth. So here we also talk about a sustainable blue economy and then economic opportunities for those who are coastal dwellers to benefit from the marine protected areas. And then when we also do establish marine protected areas, It means that we are looking at it within the broader framework of ecosystem-based marine spatial planning, which ensures that we take a system approach in creating an enabling environment for nature and then other activities to co-exist, and to ensure that we harvest marine resources from this point of view of sustainability. Freshwater has also had its fair share of the challenges. It's not only marine ecosystems. We see increases in antimicrobial resistance and antibiotic resistance. We also see that 40% of global wetlands were lost between 1997 and 2000 alone, and 81% of decline of freshwater species population. This statistics is there, but unfortunately that is the case. Of course, this also means that we need to really take critical steps to ensure water use efficiency. That is why lately we are talking about drip irrigation and other technologies that ensure that we optimize the use of water. Now, land and soil also has a few challenges in terms of the environment. We know that 50% more food that we need to feed the 10 billion population that will be in 2050, we need to produce 50% more food over what we actually produce now in order to feed the population of 10 billion, which is projected in the year 2050. In the last few years, it is evident that most of the crops that we have grown are monocultures. The advantage is because productivity is increased, but the drawback is that there's environmental degradation, loss in biodiversity, and then loss in nutrition security. These are issues that are of concern. Even though we say we don't produce enough food for the world's population, it is really, really ironic. It's even a paradox that 1/3 of the food that we produce currently goes to waste. This is food for thought. We need to really think of how to really optimize preservation of food and ensure that it is sustainable, we produce in a sustainable manner. Deforestation rate has dropped, but then we also see in some countries massive planting of trees in terms of hectares per year, about 3.2 million hectares per year for planted forest. And then we also know that urban settlements have grown more than 2.5 times since 1975, and it accounts for nearly 8% of land use in 2050. Now, I want to zoom in on the situation in Africa, and we see that out of the 10 top countries experiencing rapid urbanization, 6 of them are in Africa, and 90% of the population in these 6 top countries are exposed to air pollutants. We see mega cities such as Lagos, Cairo, Kinshasa, and other emerging mega cities such as Luanda, Johannesburg, and Dar es Salaam suffering from access to sanitation services. And this is something that has been occasioned by systematic neglect when it comes to investment in infrastructure in these mega cities. And on the coastline of Africa, there are about 320 cities. These cities are typically hubs of economic activity in terms of mining, extraction and refining, transportation, and then oil and gas exploration. And then we also see that on the continent, forest cover is projected to decrease to less than about 600 million hectares by 2050. And this is due to the fact that we are converting a lot of forests to agricultural lands. It also presupposes that we need the land for food production. Now, if we look at all of these things that I've alluded to in the previous slides, we find that population is a big contributor to that. And here on the continent, the top 10 contributors to population are Nigeria, Ethiopia, DR Congo, Egypt, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, South Africa, and Algeria. These countries contribute to annual average increases in population than any other country on the continent. And then, of course, population increase, the rate definitely is also linked to the density, which means the number of people living within a particular area, a demarcated area over a particular time. And here, the countries that are most at risk is Mauritius, that are the small island states. You can see it to the extreme right near Madagascar. something of the sort, shows that more people live in 1 kilometer square area than any other place on the continent. This also exerts pressure on environmental resources or ecological services. Now, when it comes to sanitation, there are issues because most of the countries on the continent have not been able to move beyond 50% improvement in sanitation for their urban population. We see Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Comoros, Malawi, and Eritrea within the neighborhood of 50%, but still it shows that we are far from the woods. Now, we also need to look at heterogeneities across the sub-regions on the continent. But then we see that the picture is almost identical across board. Now, if we were to look at Central Africa, East Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa, and then West Africa, and then we're to consider specific ecosystems in terms of, let's say, terrestrial ecosystem, coastal marine ecosystems for all of those countries, and how climate change, habitat conversion, overharvesting, pollution, and illegal wildlife trade, and even demographic change is affecting these geopolitical regions. We see that in almost all cases, there's been an increase in all of these biodiversity drivers, changes of drivers of biodiversity change. We see it there, though to varying degrees. So the ones that are not upright, it means that they are not increasing sharply, but they are still increasing. And then the ones that are very bold and of course broad shows the magnitude and scale of the change that we are seeing. The picture is almost identical across board on the continent. Now, I indicated that what is sustainable at the local level may not necessarily be sustainable at the global level. So here we talk about regional sustainability versus local sustainability, and the elements will differ. For some of them, the trends are mixed, and for some of them, the trends are increasing. If we were to talk about biodiversity, we see that biodiversity is reducing in both local sustainability issues and then regional sustainability issues. Whereas the drivers of ecosystem change is increasing in both directions, either for local sustainability or regional sustainability. Then this brings to the fore what we need to do in terms of governance responses to address these unpleasant statistics. We need to learn from bright spots of sustainability and the best practices and how to link it to the knowledge that we are exchanging. For instance, indigenous local knowledge is very, very important because this knowledge has been accumulated over eons of time, over millennia. Therefore, it is very useful for conservation of resources at the local level. Now, when we come to basic hand washing facilities, it is only a few countries on the continent that are nearly at the 100% rate. We talk of Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Madagascar. And then we talk about renewable water resources. The picture is there because in terms of absolute scarcity, you see countries in, let's say, the global north of Africa and to the east of Africa, all suffering from absolute scarcity. More than 10 countries are within this demarcation, and that is worrying. The same picture emerges from groundwater resources, likewise water stress. So the picture is uniform, even though the stresses that we are talking about are changing. We have deployed a number of policies to address these drivers of environmental change, these pressures of environmental change, these impacts of environmental change. However, we have not been successful all through. And of course, there are issues that we need to consider when it comes to the effectiveness of environmental policies. Now, we see that some of the policies that we have deployed relate to environmental impact assessment, regional impact assessment, regulatory impact assessment, strategic environmental assessments. All of these actions have been taken either to address policies, plans, and programs or projects. And these have been implemented at the multi-level governance level. That means that Some have been implemented at the national, some have been implemented at the supranational, and some have been implemented at the subnational levels. But then the message that we get from this is that we need policies that are implemented concurrently. So we need a mix of policies, and this mix of policies must be implemented concurrently. And when you do that, the element of incoherence may arise. So it means that there's a need for us to really consider each policy and the feedback relationship it has with another policy, so that the effect will not counterbalance. Now, if we look extreme left, we find here that data, information, and knowledge are all very critical for effective environmental policy making. So in order to identify the issue, we need data, we need information, we need knowledge. And then once we have identified the issue, we can frame the issue. If we were to take an issue of, let's say, mercury pollution from artisanal gold mining, we need to frame the issue. Is it an issue of livelihood? Is it an issue of environmental pollution? Is it a health issue? How do we frame this issue? Or it is all of the above. We need to frame the issue. And once we have framed the issue, we have a firm understanding of what the issue are, then we can begin to implement some policy measure to address it. But then, of course, it's important for us to do a baseline to know what the situation is before we even attempt to introduce the policy. So we talk about the ex-ante impact assessment, which is the baseline, which we have to do before we roll out the policy or implement the policy. And then once we have done the ex-ante impact assessment, we can then implement the policy. And then afterwards, we can do the ex-post. After we have implemented the policy over its life cycle or its life course, we can then begin to look at the ex-post and compare the ante with the post. And the issues that emerge, if there are gaps in policy implementation, things that we will not be able to address, then we will come back to issue identification again, and the cycle goes on and on. This is very, very important. It means that we have to look at the way we can integrate environmental policies across sectors. We should look at the fact that we need systematic approaches. We should have systems thinking, holistic approaches to dealing with environmental issues. This is very, very important. Now, when it comes to decision making on the environment, there are several data gaps. There are data gaps when it comes to the drivers. There are data gaps when it comes to air, biodiversity, land, oceans. There are data gaps in every environmental domain. And then we know that without data, it is very difficult for us to really elicit good science and policy making. So data is the fulcrum or the bedrock of good science and environmental policy making. And given that we have data gaps in every environmental domain, we need to really be thinking across board in a participatory manner to address this. We know that new technologies and emerging data sources will provide us with a lot of approaches or opportunities to fill in the data gaps and to make sure that the data that we are using is accessible and usable by a wide array of stakeholders. This is why open access is critical and indeed essential for equity, transparency, and then the best use of the data at hand. There's a need for us to really integrate and use data from a wide array of sources, including remote sensing, citizen science, in situ monitoring, and even remote sensing. All of these domains have a role to play when it comes to integrating the data for a comprehensive understanding of what is happening on the environment. And then, of course, we also need to understand that some of the data that we have is coarse. If it is coarse, it means that we cannot scale it down to really get a nuanced understanding of what is happening maybe at the local level. So there's a need for us to really pursue disaggregated data, which can then lead to more effective and better actions in terms of environmental policy deployment. This is very, very important. So geospatial data and disaggregated data is critical. And then we also need to have a framework for developing environmental statistics, a system for coupling environment and then economic accounting. And then, of course, if we look at the volume of remote sense data versus in situ monitoring data that is growing by the day, we need to have a system that can speak to each other. That will provide opportunity for the data to speak to each other. And there we bring the issue of interoperability into the spotlight. Now, there are equity issues that we also need to talk about when it comes to data and knowledge. Who pays for the knowledge? Who does the knowledge serve? Whose knowledge counts? Are we only taking knowledge from experts, or we are also taking knowledge from lay personalities who have also something to offer when it comes to environmental decision making? Now I want to focus attention on the 5 V's. Here, looking at the opportunities that emerging data sources and modeling affords us in our quest to really address environmental issues from a sustainability standpoint. We know that artificial intelligence and then technology analytics have become mainstream now. A lot of algorithms and programming have been deployed to do that. Now, I'll talk about the 5 V's in terms of volume, velocity, variety, and veracity. So 90% of the data that we have been created only in the last 2 years. So if we talk about data, we talk about 2.5 quintillion bytes of data, which is generated every single day. This was not possible 15 or 20 years ago. So we see vast advancement in technological drive when it comes to also the velocity, that is the speed of the data. The speed at which we can access the data has also really increased manifold. So here we can talk about 50,000 gigabytes per second for the global internet traffic as at 2018, and many other things which pertains to the speed of the data or the velocity of the data, so fast than before. Now, we also talk about data because the data is coming from sundry sources, a myriad of sources. So we have to talk about the diversity of the data, the variety of the data, and all of those things. And the 4V is the reliability and the certainty of the data, the veracity of the data. We know that the data that we are producing is enormous, but it is striking that out of the data that we produce, less than 1% of the data that we produce is analyzed, less than 1%. And it's only about 3% of the world's data that is usable and ready for interpretation. The rest, we seldom use it, which means that we are not putting the data to optimal use. And then the 5th V is the value. Really harness the potential that this data is bringing us, and also to add to make sure that it has much more value than its present value by looking at superior analytics, methods that we can deploy to make sure that we analyze it for nuanced understanding of what is taking place on the environment. Several things are happening. If we look at the outlook for the future, we can say for a fact that the environmental dimension of the SDGs are not expected to be met under the current policy scenarios. And we also realize from this presentation that all environmental areas are affected. It is not just air which is affected, water is affected, soil and land are affected, biodiversity affected. So it means that we require urgent action now in order to address this. We also require participatory approaches because the problems of the environment that we face within the 21st century cut across disciplines. It straddles several disciplines. So we need to have participatory approaches for people from various disciplines to bring their know-how and their technical expertise to bear on the process of solving environmental problems. So we talk of bottom-up and top-down approaches, which must merge at some point. And we talk about socio-technical innovations that we require to really fully address the issues. Now, in bringing this presentation to a close, I want to focus on the status quo and what is required. Now, the status quo may be characterized as the business as usual approach. But then we need to understand that this business as usual approach is not going to help us because we cannot continue to do the same thing over again and expect different results. We require integrated policies, as I've indicated earlier, and then we require transformative policies. Now, in terms of all of these things, the transformative policies, integrated policies, the aim is to drive us towards our goal of sustainability and to ensure that the environmental policy that we have implemented is effective. So here, the issue of social innovation and experimentation is critical. The issue of economic incentives, technological innovation, and then effective implementation are also very critical. And then we need to couple soft instruments and other systems of understanding the environment to ensure that we do this in a seamless manner. In short, we need transformative change to address the issues that we confront on the environment, either on the continent or the global scale, in a systematic manner. We need transformative change to bring us to sustainability in order to address the issues the way we want. We talk about the healthy planet as a foundation for all life forms. Therefore, if the environment is sustainable, all other spheres of endeavor, particularly the societal level and then the economic level, will also be seen, will also be sustainable. Thank you so much for your attention.
Very much, Professor Frederick Atuama, for this insightful presentation, thought-provoking, despite the technical challenges that we had at your end. And thank you to participants for your patience. I think Prof. Armah has done so well. We discussed in the beginning, there are some technical challenges happening at his end at the moment, and yet he was able to devise ways of reaching us with this presentation. So we are most grateful, Prof. We are very, very grateful for the presentation. We would like to have the question times. We have a number of questions. If you still have not posted your questions, we would like to invite you to post your questions so that Prof and all of us can share our thoughts on this before we take the next presentation. So I have a couple of them I'm going to read, and one that came a bit earlier says that okay, I think we can, that one is a general one, we can keep that one to the latter part of the discussions. But it says that may I get theory of change for solar energy development in the developing countries regarding to environment sustainability. So theory of change for solar energy development in developing countries. And then,
yes, so do you want me to address that before we move on?
Please go ahead. Yes.
Yes. This is a very, very important question, and I thank the participant who asked that particular question. Now, theory of change simply is the pathway that you envisage, that the steps you are taking is going to take you to your destination. That is the theory of change. And we do the theory of change because we believe that there's a link between theory and practice. Now, it is not everything that we propose that happens. So the theory of change helps you to delineate the paths that you are talking about and the challenges that you are likely to encounter in those paths as you move on towards the target. This means that you can never have a single theory of change for solar power development. Every organization will have its own theory of change. Some will say that if they deploy photovoltaics, then they subsidize it, then it can be economically feasible for people in poor neighborhoods to afford it. That is somebody's theory of change. That's a pathway the person is envisaging that people would technology diffusion in the population. But does it always work? It doesn't. So it means that we have to look at the theory of change based on the specific context. And once we have a firm grasp of what the context is, then the theory of change that we deploy would likely work. And I would also suggest that anytime we are thinking of a theory of change, we shouldn't sit in an organization and then do it. We have to go to the place that we think that they're going to be the end users of the technology. We have to go there and engage them. So we have to move from what is known as mode 1 science to mode 2 science. You go and identify the problem with the people. What is their problem exactly? If they have no access to electricity and you want to provide for them, you have to still identify the problem with them. So it's co-identification, co-design, and co-implementation of the project. That is more sustainable. That theory of change, for me, is more sustainable than any other.
Thank you very much, Prof. Armah. There is another question here. It says that I do agree that policies are very key for environmental transformation, but the challenge I see within the African context is the enforcement, effectiveness, and adequate adoption of the context of these policies.
Yes, thank you for this question. This is also very important. This is also very important. The issue of enforcement on the continent. Enforcement is strongly related to the capacity in terms of human resources, capacity in terms of technology, capacity in terms of social contract and commitments. So let me give an example. If you talk about, let's say, illegal artisanal gold mining, then the question is, whose role is to enforce regulation when it comes to illegal artisanal gold mining? Is it the community? Is it the chief? Is it the individual? Is it the Environmental Protection Agency? Whose duty is to enforce? I would say it is a collective responsibility. Everybody has a role under the Constitution to enforce environmental regulation, but we compartmentalize the issue and say that this is this person's role, but this is not my role. That is quite problematic. So it means that when you think of enforcement, you should think of, okay, I've employed many people who can now go and monitor. If you can't do that, then of course you are interested in looking at remote technologies for monitoring. So you can use a drone to monitor areas that are inaccessible to ensure that there's no encroachment. So it's also capacity building, technological capacity building. If you don't have the people to go there, you can have the technology to go there. So all of this work in a complementary manner for enforcement to be sustainable. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So it means that we all have a role to play to make sure that it is effective, but then technology is critical, social commitment is critical, because the first line of action is the people who are on the ground where the illegal activity is taking place. So if they don't see it, or if they see and then they turn a blind eye to it, enforcement can never work. So it means we have to go back to the issue of participatory approach that I hinted on earlier on, that we have to do things in a participatory manner to ensure that all of us have a role to play. We have clearly delineated our roles, we have clearly delineated our responsibilities, and then when it comes to enforcement, the penalties must also be enforced. Now, one of the reasons I've seen in our part of the world where enforcement sometimes is problematic is because people are always left off the hook because of our communal culture. So you have a system where the person who is the culprit is somebody's friend, and then they meet, and instead of the person to be arrested and dealt with, they begin to talk about old stuff, and then they don't really enforce. So we need to make sure that we have a social contract that is enforceable. We are all committed to ensuring that when it comes to the environment, we all have a role to play. We cannot leave it to another person to do it. We must all be on board to make sure that enforcement and effectiveness is ensured.
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy that more questions are coming. The participants are engaging with this. Of course, environmental sustainability is everything, as we saw Prof demonstrating how it's connected with our social and cultural development, how it's connected with the economy, how it's connected with the entire ecosystem. This is very important. We have one question. It says that question reads that, thanks Prof for the insightful presentation. May I know your views on how well we are doing with the inclusion of women when it comes to environmental decision making?
Thank you very much. This is also a very important question. I thank the participant who asked this question. It's a very important question. Now, when it comes to inclusion of women in environmental decision making, we've made progress, but I would say we still lag behind other jurisdictions. Now, if you look at our traditional systems of decision making, women play a pivotal role in decision making. So sometimes we say that for any decision to be taken, we have to go and consult the old lady, as we say in our context, which means that the lady is the repository of knowledge that we can always consult to ensure that we do things that inure to the benefit of the environment and then by extension, the society. But when it comes to environmental decision-making, those golden nuggets that we could have abstracted from society and implemented in our environmental decision-making, we have not done so. So we have not tapped into our cultural value system, which really gives a pride of place to women, and to bring those notions into our environmental decision-making. So I would say that the approaches that we have adopted so far is more like tokenism. Oh, if it is an environmental decision-making committee or something of that nature, let's bring one lady. Then we satisfy our conscience that, oh, we are trying to balance the gender. But that is tokenism. We should make sure that we are not just including women, but we're also including women in positions of influence, in positions where they are the leaders when it comes to the decision-making. That is where we can talk about inclusive involvement of women in a sustainable manner when it comes to environmental decision-making.
Thank you very much, including women in very important positions of decision-making. Including issues regarding environment, not only just to satisfy, for example, application requirements to put a woman on the panel somewhere, but conscious effort to include them. I think we've had a lot of thought-provoking issues here from Prof. Armah. He mentioned that knowledge and data is critical in addressing environmental and sustainability issues. He said that the major gap in data need to be addressed regarding the environment. And what is even thought-provoking, really very profound, is that the 90% of data on the environment was created only within the last 2 years. That is something. He said data is the bedrock of science and innovation. He said we need to integrate data for environmental sustainability and innovation, in fact, by extension and development. This is very great. Now, somebody is asking a question which is linked to this with regards to research that can support us to get this data that we need to inform decision making. He said, as an early career academic in Nigerian universities, how can our research effort be sustained in an environment of unpredictable salary, which is our major source of funding, and near lack of funding arrangement outside the TET fund, I guess is the Tertiary Education Trust Fund also in Nigeria, which appears to have been hijacked by senior colleagues with connections. So how can we have funding for research, including research in the area of environment, to bridge this data gap in order to inform decision?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is also, but I really like the questions that have come today. Very insightful, very thought-provoking. That, I mean, keeps you thinking, and then the brainstorming never ends. This is fantastic, and I want to thank all the panelists, the participants who have actually asked questions. Now, this is important. You see, there's a saying that if you want to go far, go together. You see, so you want a system where you want to go very, very far. You go with somebody else. Now, you want to make sure that you are collaborating. So this platform that Frontier Science Seminar Series has created is a veritable opportunity for you to really harness the potential. Even just today, I've shared about 10 links to sources of useful information that you can actually tap into when it comes to research excellence, data funding sources. Just even today, I've shared about 10 of them. So on this platform alone, we are making that possible. Now, the people who have also come together here to participate as part of this seminar series have shared their contacts. There's opportunity for you to network and partner with these people who have come. And that is where the opportunities would emanate from, or the opportunities will emerge. So we can't always rely on the Educational Trust Fund. This is also a platform that you can also build network. You can have 1 or 2 people who are working on a project. They can look at your core competencies and skill sets and say that this is somebody I can collaborate with. And then the partnership begins from there. So look at this opportunity that we have given on this platform as one that you can harness for your own career growth.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Armah. Thank you so much for sharing thoughts with us on this subject. We now move on to the second speaker. I told you from the beginning that today we have very distinguished scholars of African descent, African scholars who have given us the honor to share their thoughts with us on this subject. And our second speaker is Professor Amaeshi, Professor Kenneth Amaeshi. Professor Kenneth Amaeshi holds a chair in Business and Sustainable Development, and he is the director of the Sustainable Business Initiative at the University of Edinburgh Business School. Professor Amaeshi, just one second. Yeah, Professor Amaeshi is also a visiting scholar at the Center for Corporate Responsibility, the Cranfield School of Management, UK, and an external examiner at the said Business School, Oxford University, the visiting professor at the First Bank Sustainability Center, Lagos Business School, Pan-African Atlantic University, Nigeria. His area of research includes sector-level policy for sustainability and sustainability strategy. Professor Amaeshi is also a visiting professor of strategy and governance at the Lagos Business School, Nigeria. His Google Scholar profile suggests that he's one of the prolific writers in this area, well cited across the globe. We are very honored to have you, Professor Kenneth Amaeshi, to share your thought with us. Professor, over to you, sir.
Okay, good evening, everyone, and good afternoon, wherever you are. It's my pleasure to be here, and I thank Professor Armah for a very insightful presentation. I don't know if he's still online, but in case he is, I would like to reach out to him at some point, because last week I just completed a workshop with Ernst & Young, West Africa, where we are looking at data for the SDGs. And it was in Nigeria. We brought together the Nigerian government, the National Bureau of Statistics, the Ministry of Finance, and the private sector. And we all agreed that we can't track our progress if we don't have data. And I liked one of his slides that talked about data for climate change or environment. I think it'd be nice to see, have a chat afterwards to see how we can connect in that regard. So thank you for that. And you also did a very good work for me by providing the introduction and setting the scene. So I would just follow from where you stopped. But in my own case, I would like to focus on the private sector, the business side of things. I've been given this, my research is mainly around corporate sustainability, how the private sector engages with the SDGs. So it'd be nice to see how things can be connected. So hello, yeah. So what I would do now is to move straight ahead. I would have started with a meeting, but I'll still need to do that in a bit, but talk about the implications and tension. So like I mentioned, my research is mainly on corporate sustainability or the private sector engagement with it. But the topic I was given to do, cover today talks about sustainability in research, in scientific research in Africa. which I thought might be an interesting one for us as researchers to reflect on. So this for me would be more like straying or going outside my sphere of comfort. But let's see how we can deal with it. So in terms of meaning, and my presentation will be very much interactive. So I hope the organizers will bear with me and allow participants to chip in as they like, as they wish, so that way we can make it truly interactive. So don't leave anything to the end. If you want to ask questions, jump in and let's make it fun. So I'll start with the idea. And having listened to Professor Armah, what do you think is the meaning of sustainability? How does sustainability come across to you from a lay person's perspective? I know we are all scholars and interested in these kind of ideas, but sustainability must come to us or come across to us in a particular way. I'm just wondering. Any thoughts?
Prof, everyone is muted automatically. So if you want to speak,
unmute them, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I can unmute them for sure.
Yeah, please. So
now if you want to speak, just unmute yourself and chip in.
Okay, thank you very much, Bright. You can as well raise your hand. I think there is an option there, so I can invite you in if you want to. Does anyone want to come in? What do you think of when you hear the word sustainability?
Should I mention the name of my student here?
Sorry?
بغيت كنضروك فين غادي تكاو لا يمشي غادي تكاو غادي يمشي غير كان عندها الموسيقى هبتي.
Okay, it seems that there's a bit of challenge there, right? Because
it's just the ability to exist constantly in the 21st century. This is Dr. Ron from Chicago, Illinois, USA.
Oh, great. So for you, is the ability to exist, how did you describe it? Exist like?
Ability to exist constantly, something that is ongoing. Yeah,
ongoing, okay, great, yeah.
In the modern society or in the contemporary period.
Okay. Sorry, so what's the area of research?
Hello?
Yeah, a friend from Illinois. I mean, what's the area of research?
Oh, wow. I am a psychologist.
Okay.
My research was focused on Nigerian trend nurses experience of workplace stress in the US. Nigerians nurses that train in Nigeria, they come over here and they face all forms of stress. So I research on that. It's just an aspect of IO psychology, industrial and organizational psychology. Yeah.
Okay. So you must have a lot of work at this point in time with the COVID, yeah?
Oh, obviously.
Is that sustainable? Yeah. Okay.
So
okay. Any other person with ideas about sustainability?
Is it raising hand?
Oh yeah. Okay, Frederick. I mean, you come last because you're the expert. Yeah. So let's ask Isaac. I hope you don't mind,
sir.
Frederick. Anyway, yeah.
That's okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Go on.
According to me, sustainability is when we keep routine of a project. For example, after completion or exit strategy, there should be community-based. That it should be still, community owned. The project or programs that have been run by other stakeholders should be owned by the community.
So is that linked to continuity or what?
Yeah, continuity. Yeah, in other words.
Continuity. Okay.
For example, if I give you an instance, for example, in Africa we have a lot of sun. Get me right, huh?
Yeah.
And then that sun we want to use as a solar. We shall use solar energy, and that solar energy can be used for electricity and water production. You see?
Yeah.
Then you know that heat now can be sustainable in terms of using that energy into different aspects.
Okay, so how do you describe that in a word? What is it? Is it about multiple usage of something? Is that what you mean by what sustainability means to you? Diverse applications or what?
Yeah, it is actually, and after exit strategy, for example, I am implementing a project like drilling boreholes, or when those boreholes will not be used for fuel, but will be used for this, you know, that solar energy.
Okay. So more like repurposing, making sure some things continue, right? Yeah. Reuse and repurposing, right? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, but it links to continuity. So, Adewumi, please.
Good evening, sir, or good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so for me, sustainability has to do with being able to maintain a particular standard. A standard has been set, or a particular level has been set, and being able to maintain that. And an example is speaking from public health, you know, but we, like, an intervention was carried out for a particular set of people. For example, the female sex workers, maybe it's been found that they don't use condoms, you know, because they feel that they don't use condom because they feel that they can get more money by doing that. And an intervention was, you know, established for them in such a way that they made them to understand the importance of using condoms, even at the expense of, you know, losing money for them. And after a while, and you know, free condoms were made available for them. And after the project, that free condom were withdrawn, and to see they were, it was observed to see if those female sex workers can actually go and buy condom in the absence of condoms, and that was measured for a particular period of time. And this behavior change was, you know, assessed, and you know, it's been able to see that after the intervention, that they can actually maintain the behavior of, you know, the use of condoms. You know, that's my own understanding of sustainability, being able to, you know, maintain a particular standard that has been set or a level.
Okay, so it's about maintaining. So it still goes back to that. I mean, I have three things that they're all around continuity, ongoing, and then occasionally it's about maintenance, right, of a particular practice, something like that.
Yeah, Prof. Okay. If I may define it from the atmospheric perspective,
yeah,
more or less, I would refer it as the capacity for Earth's biosphere and human civilization to coexist. More or less, a coexistence of human civilization and the biosphere, Earth's biosphere.
Okay, so it's a kind of balancing, right?
Absolutely, balancing, yeah. That's true. Between human and the biosphere.
Are you a scientist? I mean, are you an environmental scientist like Professor Frederick?
No, this is still the same Dr. Ronald Wano, the psychologist.
Okay, the psychologist, yeah.
The same person, yeah. Right.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, Prof, we have one more here. It says that a critical indicator of sustainability is the ability or potential to satisfy the needs of the present and future generations.
Needs of present and future generation. Okay. Okay. Any other person before I? Okay. Let's stay on with this idea of ongoing continuity, maintenance, and even balance, and the need to, even if you think of current generation and next generation, I think it's still again that balance, right?
Prof, somebody is raising the hand there.
Okay.
Two people. I have Edward King and then Prof. Frederick Armah.
Okay, Edward, do you want to come in?
Okay, good evening, Prof. I just wanted to double click what other people have said. I think the word sustainability, you know, is gotten from the word sustain, right?
Yeah.
So basically, I believe when you say sustainability, you're trying to look at the ways by which we can avoid, you know, damage or wastage. So So it's a way of maintaining balance, okay, across board. So irrespective of the feed, it could be within the ecosystem in terms of the environmental structure. So we are looking at maintaining that balance without damaging resources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I like your intro, the way you say balance without harm, right? Which is interesting. So you've introduced a direction to it. So because the question I'll ask is that whether we're looking at ongoing continuity, maintenance, balance, are these positive or negative?
Oh, there is one more hand up.
Okay. Prof. Yeah, Prof. Frederick, you maybe can come in and say what you want.
Yes, yeah. So I just want to add my voice to what has been said. So if we look at it, the question that comes up is whether sustainability is an end in itself or is a means for an end. So the question of value rationality versus instrumental rationality. And I want to look at sustainability from three key words: value, processes, outcomes.
So you talked about, you said the three things are what? Value?
So is sustainability an end in itself or is a means to an end?
Yeah.
So if it is an end in itself, so we talk about them, it's a value that we aspire to. So okay, value rationality comes in. But if it's a means to an end, it's an instrument that we use to get to our value, then it's instrumental in that sense.
Okay,
then,
so you're making a distinction between normative and instrumental.
Exactly. And then to know from that particular or derivative of that then becomes the values, the processes, and the outcomes. So sustainability can be an outcome, but it can also be a process.
Yeah. Okay. So Ben, you want to say something? Yeah. You're gonna mute yourself.
Yeah, it's very interesting to look at the sustainability from this perspective with regards to the African research environment. I think sustainability for me is the continuity of seeing that researches that are initiated continue to add value to the society, and they should be they should be able to be auto-sustaining, kind of, if there's anything like that. They should be able to continue to grow more even when they have been initiated.
Okay, fine. I think it still boils down to the idea of continuity. Well, in this case, it's more of a self-sustaining, right? What you mean by auto-continuity. And Professor Armah also made a distinction between instrumental and normative. We'll come to that in a minute. But given the dominant view of sustainability here, and which is not unusual, is about continuity and maintenance and so on and so forth. Then the question for me is that positive or negative? So is sustainability in itself positive or negative? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Bright, it seems, have you muted everyone again?
No, people can unmute themselves.
Yeah, just feel free. Is it a bad thing or good thing? I'm asking you questions. So, I guess you didn't expect it to be like this.
It's a good thing, sir. I feel it's a good thing.
It's a good thing, right?
Yes, sir. It's positive.
Yeah, sustainability is always friendly. But let me give you, okay, it's about maintenance, right? It's about continuity.
Yes,
I guess I know we are from Nigeria. Think about corruption in Nigeria. Is this sustainable? Has it been sustained over time?
Yes,
right?
sir. It's been sustained over time. It's been sustained. So that looking at it from that angle is negative. Actually, I never could have thought in that aspect, but it's been sustained over time. really.
Yeah.
All over
So,
the place.
yeah, it's always a usual. And Ben, you want to come in again? Yeah. We have to unmute yourself. Okay.
Yeah. So if you are trying to consider if it is positive or negative, then you need to ask the question: what is the cost of the sustainability? So if the cost in the long run outweighs the benefit, then it's negative sustainability. That's my view.
Yeah, but you're also introducing the fact that it's about something that has that cost. But so it's no longer about continuity, right? So you're changing the equation. So the dominant expression or description of sustainability so far is about continuity. And I want to challenge that. And it's something normal because people often say, oh, you know, and that's more like the everyday usage of the word sustainability. So today we hear sustainable economy, sustainable agriculture, and whenever I hear that, I ask me, what does this really mean? And like I said, we are not the only ones who have made that assumption, but it's kind of a dominant way of framing sustainability. So we already talked about this, and Professor Amaeshi was talking about the weak sustainability versus the kind of strong nested sustainability. So you see, you're not alone. You know, so I didn't prepare. I prepared this slide before I asked you this question. But wherever I've presented this, people talk about longevity, consistency, continuity, durability. If you're an accountant, they will now say, "Oh, going concern." So if in the case of a business, right, it can also be stability or maintenance or long-term and profitability. But when you look at all these words, and they are not neutral. Or sorry, they are neutral because whatever you append to them, then they will qualify that. So if it's about corruption, you can say sustainable corruption. So sustainability in itself can be neutral. So, and it can also be embody some kind of complexities and tension because on one hand, you're thinking about maintenance. Maintaining the status quo means that you're also not interested in change. And if you listen to Professor Armah's presentation, it was all about, oh, we need to change, we need to change, we need to find new ways of doing things. Well, you can't continue the old way. You can't maintain the status quo and expect change, right? So, but the sustainability we have in mind here is what I call progressive or positive social, environmental, and economic development, which comes back to the sense of balance. And I like the point somebody made about balance without harm. So the person started qualifying it and putting some kind of direction to the flow. So it's about progressive development in that sense. And this is useful because when you go into organizations, you want organizations to imbibe the sustainability idea. If you don't have a common language, it becomes quite difficult. So I thought also, if we are thinking of sustainability in research, we probably also need a similar, or to a large extent, a harmonized view of it so that we know we are talking about the same thing. Because the tendency for us to run away with our different ideas of sustainability. Within the research context, I thought it also nice to look at sustainable innovation. So sustainable innovation here is defined as a process where sustainability considerations, environmental, social, and financial, right, are integrated into a company system from idea generation through to research and development, as well as commercialization. So this is more like the corporate setting where companies engage in research and development, but that research and development will need to take into consideration environmental, social, as well as financial implications. And as researchers, I think we might, in a way, although we are not all working for companies, but the research and development we engage in can also reflect or cause us to think about sustainability. Innovation is important because it's seen as key driver of sustainability is important because it helps innovation, really. And if you think of yourself as a company, you can find this in different aspects from your value chain, right? Different aspects of your value chain. Let's assume you're a manufacturing company, from your inbound logistics to after sales. So you can think about the process of value creation. So when Professor Armah talked about different layers or different levels of sustainability engagement, where you can have your policy dimension, you can have corporate, community, individuals. Well, think about this as a company. You're a company, you're a business, you're engaging in sustainability. How do you embed sustainability in everything you do? So you need to think about how you create value, and the value you create and how you do that, and begin to see how sustainability can inform and shape the decisions made in different parts of that value chain. But sustainability also is a mindset. Because it's about balancing, we know that our actions or even our inactions have effects. So once we do something, it impacts on the other. So that sense of connectedness or system thinking is an aspect of it. But if you know your activities or actions have impacts on others, there is something in you that prompts you to think about what to do with it, either to minimize it or to improve the situation. But sometimes we can know that our activities have negative impacts on others and we do nothing about it. So in that case, nothing changes. So that's where sustainability requires a sense of innovation and creativity. So Professor Armah showed us the problems of the world. That's, in a way, trying to sensitize our sense of justice and fairness. But we can as well end there. It's a great lecture and we walk away. If nothing happens, or if we're not prepared to make any changes to our behavior and things like that, then nothing will change. But in making that change, we also need to ensure that we remain in business, assuming we're a business. So how do you do it in such a way that you're not out of business? So that's where innovation and creativity come in. Then the final bit is the sense of transparency and accountability. He also talked about data, and data is useful to promote transparency and accountability. So, but what are the implications? The question for me, as a researcher or somebody who in the academia, and I guess many of us are, is to ask ourselves this simple question: is every innovation ethical and useful? What do you think? Is every innovation ethical and useful?
Sure not.
Sorry?
Yes.
Please, you can raise your hand.
Not every innovation is useful. Yes.
Yeah, feel free to raise your hand.
Up, you can be invited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is Felix, does he want to talk? Felix Menu, I think he's submitted. Okay, so the question is every innovation ethical and useful? Any thoughts?
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Well, I think just to answer the question directly, I don't think every innovation is ethical and useful, because in as much as we have ethical innovation, you also have unethical innovation. And I give you a typical example.
Okay.
For instance, you are innovating, firearms. Yeah, those firearms can be ethically used to combat terrorism. Again, those firearms can also be used, for terrorism and be used for illegal activities. So, in as much as that's development or innovation of a firearm is a good one, but it can also be used unethically. So, again, not every innovation is ethical and useful. That is my thought.
Okay, fantastic. Does anyone disagree with him? Any disagreements or endorsements?
I endorse his opinion because not all the innovations are useful and not all the innovation are ethical. I think so. No, not all.
Okay.
But
so as a researcher, then how do you determine what you engage in? Who helps? How do you shape your engagement with your research? How do you determine what is ethical and useful through your research? Is it something we reflect on, or I mean, or is it something that happens? So Roland, as industrial psychologist, how do you determine what is ethical and useful through your research?
Yeah,
so,
you just have to look at the impact of your innovation to the population, because by and large, you are going down to the population to test your innovation. There will be the human population would be there for every reasonable research to be approved, to be termed fair. You are dealing with humans, just as the first person said, the very first person that responded to your question. Some of these innovations are made with good intentions, but in the end, they are taken to the wrong direction. So the objective might not be the same as the outcome of the innovation. So we can say that every innovation cannot be ethical and useful at the same time. Some of them may be, some of them may not be. It all depends on the objective and the impact on the human population.
Okay, so if you bring it to this vaccine problem now, I mean, are they ethical or unethical? The vaccine thing, can you think of, because say for example, Pfizer or Moderna, they've done something that has not been done before, right? And and if you ask people, they say, oh, we don't know the full consequences. We don't know what will happen, you know, at the end of the day. So would that be ethical and useful innovation?
I think if it have a really positive impact and it will overcome the problem of the vaccine, of the COVID, it will be good and nice, and it's a good.
But do you know the total consequences of this innovation?
Yes, we don't know yet its consequences, but for example, if you look for the biological weapons, it's some kind of innovation, but it's not ethically to innovate a biological weapon, right? Am I right? It's not ethically. It's not useful to prepare a virus or create a new virus or doing genetically engineered or mutated virus. This is not an ethical innovation. But if you try to find the vaccine or try to find a solution for this problem, this is a good and positively impacted and very good innovative, and it is ethically to find a positive solution to overcome the problem of the virus. But
yeah, I understand. My question is rather straightforward. I've said, I know that they have good intentions, but good intentions sometimes lead to unplanned negative consequences.
Yeah, that's what I mean. When you are creating a virus, for sure, it's not ethically to create a new virus. But if you are trying to overcome the problem of this created virus by preparing or innovate a new vaccine, I think this ethically is right.
Is ethically right at that point in time, right? But there are certain things we don't know about it in terms of the consequence. I'm not a scientist here. I'm just maybe somebody who is in that space might contribute to this. When you are designing something of this nature, do you know completely the full consequences of what is being produced at that point in time?
For sure, no, because at the scientists, sometimes we say if we have found a negative result, this is a good result. But sometimes you have a negative consequences, but you didn't know that there will be a negative consequences for the innovation you have done.
Yeah, so what we have today, I mean, let's say in the next 20 years, this vaccine is found to have problems. So the problem might not manifest in the first 5 years, 10 years, but maybe 20 years down the line, it starts to produce certain things that we are not taking into consideration then, right? So the question, sorry?
For example, I would like to tell you, for example, they create or prepare new medical or new medicine for cancer, against the cancer, right? And after some while, they found that it have a negative impact, a negative, symptoms on the ill people, You know what I mean? And they didn't know. Sometimes the medical and the medicine have side effects.
Yeah, I agree. So I think we agreed on the fact that we don't know the full consequences
or not.
We may not know the full consequences, but we still need to come to a view and progress. Sometimes also the consequences might be positive. So if you think of the case of Viagra, it was developed for something else, but it's now doing wonders in other parts of the world. I mean, other parts of human life, right? So this.
Hello, Prof.
Yeah.
Sorry to interject. I'm not a researcher, right? I play in the field of risks and cybersecurity, right?
Okay, fantastic.
And in my field, when you talk about ethicality, right? When you say someone is unethical, you know, you're looking at someone who is exhibiting negative tendencies. So for instance, we have what is called ethical hackers and unethical hackers.
Okay.
Now, when you say unethical hacker, this person is trying to use the knowledge he has for offensive purposes.
Okay.
So in my context, I'm looking at unethical innovations or research or whatever it is from the perspective of being deliberate, not from the perspective of, you know, unintended mistake. So what I'm trying to say is this: when you say a research can be unethical, my point of view is that this was done deliberately for deception purposes or for harmful purposes, not that you did a research unknowingly along the line, it caused a damage or whatever it is. So that is, I'm trying to look at unethical innovation from the point of deliberate action to cause deception or damage.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, these are all great points, and this is also a very controversial space, and I did that deliberately. It's not that I have the answers, but just to encourage us to think about some of the things we do, and sometimes we receive the ethical standards from our universities or research councils. So once we've met them, then we move ahead. But that in itself robs us the opportunity to reflect as researchers what these things mean. You find these ethical standards mainly, again, in some developed economies, but what if you're in some African universities where the either the process or procedure or even the standards themselves are not there? What should you do as a researcher, and does your research provide you space to reflect on the ethical implications of your work? So I'm drawing from the work of Stigo and his colleagues. I won't go into the because of interest of time, but he highlighted 4 aspects of things we need to think about when we are looking at responsible innovation. One is what you call anticipation here. Anticipation is about the possible risks. In the European context, we're talking about precautionary measures. So we may not see the entire implications, but we do our best possible to mitigate or anticipate and manage. Right? The other thing is what they call reflexivity. Reflexivity here means it's a form of governance, but you're asking yourself, you're framing your issues in the sense that you are considering, again, the implications, but from a wider perspective, and holding yourself. I think I love what he says. He said it means holding a mirror up to one's own activities, commitment and assumptions, being aware of the limits of knowledge and being mindful that a particular framing of an issue may not be universally held. So a good example here will be the issue of sustainability, which can be framed in different ways. And I think it was Edward that talked about the unethical hacker and the ethical hacker. Things can be framed in different ways that are not universally acceptable, not universally agreed. So he also talked about, or they talked about inclusion. To what extent are we including other stakeholders who might benefit from this research, or just having a broad consultation and awareness of the impact? I think it was our colleague, the industrial psychologist, who talked about the usefulness, the utility of our research in action, those who will benefit from it. So you're thinking about inclusion. And the 4th point they made is responsiveness, us being able to respond and address some of the challenges that come out of our research. So the left 4 questions, some set of questions. If you're looking at products related questions. Some of the questions there might be, how will the risks and benefits be distributed, right? What other impacts can be anticipated? How might this change in the future? What don't we know about, and what might we never know about? So this question, product questions, can relate to the vaccines, for example. And we begin to use that. Probably they went through this process before approving some of these vaccines today. So the process question might be, how should standards be drawn up and applied? How should the risk and benefits be defined and measured? Who is in control? Who is taking part? Who will take responsibility if things go wrong? And how do we know we are right? So these are very deep questions. And as scientists and the works we do, if we want them to reflect the sustainability agenda, to a large extent, if we also see sustainability as a progressive development, we may not be able to escape these questions, and they can also help us align our research agenda to that responsibility question. So the purpose question is, why are researchers doing it? So again, a colleague in the US who is looking at Nigerian nurses and the stress they face, the question is, why Nigeria nurses? There are other nurses coming in. So why are you doing that? Why are you singling out a particular country? This motivation transparent in the public interest? You know, there are also questions about using either Black people or white people or different sorts of people for research experiments. Okay, who will benefit? What are they going to gain, and what are the alternatives? So these are critical questions, and based on this, the European Union defined responsible research and innovation as an approach that anticipates and assesses potential implications and societal expectations with regard to research and innovation, with the aim to foster the design of inclusive and sustainable research and innovation. So that's where I want to stop. I know in the interest of time, it would have been nice to go further and explore some of the tensions here, but the conversation so far has been very encouraging, and I'll stop here. Thanks for your time.
Much, Prof. So very thought-provoking talk. Again, I promise you from the beginning that we have two distinguished speakers, and you bear with me that we've had a lot of engagement with them. Are there questions? I have a couple of them. If there are more questions, please post them and we will discuss them briefly. It says that, thank you, Prof. If we want to utilize, sorry, I think I missed this now. I think that is still on the previous presentation. So we don't have any question directly to this one. Yeah, is there any questions, please? We've had a lot of things there. He has unpacked, Prof has unpacked a lot of things. First, teasing us with our own understanding regarding what we mean by sustainability. And I think the overall perspective is that it connotes many things, including consistency, continuity, durability, stability, maintenance, long-term profitability, and so on and so forth. But he also said that we should look at it also as progressive. If we look at it from the perspective of progressive, it could be positive. And then we will have the social, environmental, and economic dimensions of it. It says sustainable innovation is a process. It's a process where sustainability considerations are integrated to produce something for commercialization. A few things that he shared with us, which I want to wait for questions if there are any. We are running a bit out of time, but he says that sustainability has to do with a mindset. It's a mindset, and that is very important. It has to do with a sense of connectedness, that is system thinking, sense of innovation, creativity. And then he teases us to rethink whether every innovation is ethical and useful. And he said that he doesn't think that he wants to provide yes or no answer, but we need to think that, and we need to reflect on the ethical implications of innovation. Then he shared with us the thought on responsible innovation. It should be anticipatory, flexibility, inclusion, and responsiveness. And he left with us the European Commission, European Union's definition of responsible research and innovation. That is an approach that anticipates and assesses potential implications and the social expectations with regards to research and innovation, with the aim to foster the design of inclusive and sustainable research and innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have really had a very engaging discussions here. There is one comment here. It says that how is sustainability related to data and information management? How is sustainability related to data information management? Prof, if you want to share your thought, just with a few seconds.
Yeah, I think for me, sustainability requires data and information.
Yeah.
So I'll put it the other way around. So if we want to do our sustainability, we need information, we need data to measure and track. And the SDGs in particular would need a lot of data and information to be managed.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Professor Brighton Waru, you want to take over and share with us a few announcements, if there are any?
Thank you very much, David, and the speakers, Professor Kenneth Amaeshi and Professor Armah, for this thought-provoking evening. I think the way you have made the interactions has been quite great, and everybody participating. Thank you, everyone, for today. We are short of time, otherwise we would have allowed Professor Amaeshi to finish his thought, but I think so far, so good. Before we go, I just want to highlight that the next session comes on the 28th of March, and then we'll be looking at the role of the private sector in scientific research in Africa. This will be presented by Mr. Oluwakanmo, who is the Executive Director, Retail Banking, University Monument Bank in Nigeria. So please don't miss to join us in this, and we'll be sending the link for registration hopefully later this week. So please join and invite your colleagues to join us as we continue this discussion. Thank you very much and have a good evening.
Group photo.
Group photo. Yeah. Okay, please just a minute for group photo.
Yes.
If you can show your picture, that would be great. So, Eman, can you do that, please?
Yes. If you want to share your photo, please open your camera.